The desert air was heavy with dust and gunfire when the call came in. SEAL Team Bravo. Commander down, pinned under enemy fire. Every second counted. Inside Forward Operating Base Sentinel, one soldier didn't wait for backup. Staff Sergeant Claire Monroe slung her rifle and charged toward the sound of chaos. That day, she wasn't just fighting through bullets and explosions, she was dragging a wounded Navy SEAL commander out of the jaws of death. What no one knew in that moment was that this act of raw courage would do more than save a life. It would ignite a connection forged in fire, one that years later, when the uniforms were pressed and the rifles were silent, would carry them down the aisle together. This is the story of how a battlefield rescue became a love story, strong enough to last a lifetime. And a question for you. If you were in a battlefield and someone risked their life to save you, what would be your first thought? Share your answer in the comments below, or we're eager to hear your story. The morning sun scorched the rocky slopes of Kunar Province, casting long shadows over Forward Operating Base Sentinel. Dust swirled in the dry wind, catching in the folds of camouflage netting stretched across defensive positions. Every soldier moved with quiet precision. Weapons checked, radios tuned, eyes scanning the rugged terrain that had been a silent enemy for months. Claire Monroe adjusted the straps of her plate carrier and ran a practiced inspection over her M4 carbine, counting rounds, checking the sights, confirming the condition of her magazines. 4 years of deployments had honed her instincts. Every glance, every movement carried weight. The base's eastern ridge, where her squad held perimeter duty, was the most likely avenue for enemy infiltration. Even the smallest movement could signal danger. A sudden crackle over the radio split the morning monotony. SEAL Team Bravo, Commander down. Heavy contact. Immediate reinforcement required. Claire froze only for a heartbeat. Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds had been leading his team through a narrow valley when insurgents erupted from prepared positions, raining automatic fire from concealed hills. The voice on the radio was calm but urgent, each word carrying the gravity of lives hanging in the balance. She knew the terrain. She knew the stakes. Without hesitation, Claire called her squad to attention, the urgency in her tone leaving no room for doubt. Every soldier understood that hesitation could cost lives. Rushing toward the staging area, Claire felt the familiar adrenaline spike. Her squad followed in tight formation, boots pounding the metal deck of the helicopters waiting to lift them into the fight. The flight was tense and silent except for clipped communications. Maps spread out on knees, fingers tracing the approach route, calculating cover. Angles of fire, extraction points. The valley below was a chessboard of danger. Peaks and ridges carved the landscape into lethal traps, perfect for ambushes. Enemy positions were fortified, well concealed, ready to exploit any mistake. Every second mattered. Landing 20 meters from the SEAL team's last known location, the helicopter skidded across rocky ground under heavy fire. Sparks danced where rounds struck, the roar of engines competing with the staccato of automatic weapons. Claire dropped from the aircraft, scanning fast, taking in positions, cover, and the distance to the wounded commander. Her squad fanned out, establishing a defensive perimeter, suppressive fire cutting paths through enemy concentrations. She took a quick breath and focused on the goal. Reach Reynolds. Stabilize him, extract him alive. Time stretched, seconds elongating under stress. Every step calculated, every movement deliberate. This was not a test, not a drill. Every instinct, every training module she had endured was now the difference between life and death. Claire Monroe froze for only a heartbeat when she spotted the radio coordinates for Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds' position. The valley below was a tangle of rocks and ridges, and smoke from recent firefights still hung in the air like a warning. 4 insurgents had pinned down the SEAL team, their automatic rifles slicing the air with deadly precision. Reynolds was exposed, attempting to direct his men even as blood seeped through his uniform. Every soldier in the squad knew instinctively that hesitation would cost lives. Claire's pulse quickened, but her mind remained razor sharp. There was no option but forward. She glanced at her squad. Each member's eyes met hers, silent confirmation that they understood what was coming. Claire didn't need to issue long orders. Move fast, move smart, she said, her voice calm but decisive. We're going in and we're bringing them out. Every word was measured, yet carried authority. They adjusted their positions, checked their weapons one last time, and synchronized watches. There would be no second chance. Every meter forward was a gamble against insurgents holding the high ground. The decision to lead the assault wasn't impulsive. Years of ranger training had built a foundation of calculated risk-taking. Claire weighed the dangers. The terrain, the enemy fire, and the only variable she could control, her squad, and her own actions. The SEAL commander was not just another soldier. He was pinned, bleeding, and relying entirely on reinforcements. That knowledge crystallized the choice. She moved first, setting an example, her boots crunching against loose gravel as she advanced, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. Suppressive fire erupted from her team behind her, cutting down threats as they approached. Claire's training in close-quarters combat became instinct. Her movements were fluid, precise, almost rehearsed. She ducked behind rocks, returned fire where necessary, and signaled to her squad to maintain covering positions. Each step forward was a negotiation with death. She calculated trajectories, identified enemy patterns, and read the battlefield as a living organism, anticipating threats before they manifested. Sweat ran down her face, dust mixed with blood from minor scrapes, but her focus never wavered. Every second was measured, every action deliberate. When she reached the first insurgent firing position, Claire neutralized the threat with a combination of tactical, precision, and raw courage. Her squad advanced simultaneously, the rhythm of suppressive fire and movement creating a corridor toward Reynolds. Even with adrenaline surging, her mind remained analytical, each decision a reflection of training, experience, and instinct. The pinned commander's eyes flickered toward her as she closed the distance, recognition and relief mingling in the briefest of glances. In that moment, Claire's choice to act under fire became more than a decision. It became a statement of responsibility and leadership. Every step she had taken, every tactical calculation, was focused on one goal: reach Reynolds, stabilize him, and ensure extraction. The weight of command, the lives depending on her judgment, and the unforgiving environment pressed on her like a physical force. But there was no hesitation, no doubt. In the chaos of bullets and smoke, Claire Monroe advanced, not as a soldier following orders, but as a leader choosing to confront danger head-on. Claire Monroe reached the pinned SEAL commander, David Reynolds, and immediately assessed his condition. Blood soaked through his uniform. His breathing was labored, and every movement caused a wince that tightened her chest. There was no time for hesitation. Enemy fire still raked the valley, bullets whipping past exposed rocks, echoing off jagged ridges. Claire's hands worked quickly, checking for injuries, applying pressure where needed, and preparing him for movement. Reynolds attempted to rise, grimacing, but the pain made even the smallest motion impossible. She shook her head, signaling that she had it. "Sir, I've got you. Just stay with me," she said, her voice calm but urgent, a lifeline cutting through chaos. The extraction would not be simple. Terrain was uneven, dotted with loose rocks, boulders, and jagged outcroppings that made every step treacherous. The enemy's positions gave them a tactical advantage, and suppressive fire from Claire's squad had only temporarily stalled their attacks. She hoisted Reynolds onto her shoulder in a fireman's carry, feeling the weight of both his body and the stakes of the mission. Every step was deliberate, balancing speed with caution, avoiding open areas where enemy fighters could zero in. Her squad moved around her, covering flanks, returning fire, and clearing a path through a deadly labyrinth that seemed designed to trap them. Claire's mind raced through tactical options while her muscles burned. Each decision, from which ridge to take to how to use natural cover, was calculated in seconds. Her training with the Rangers had instilled an instinctive ability to read terrain and anticipate enemy movement. She shifted Reynolds slightly, ensuring he remained stable, while maintaining awareness of both threats and squad positions. Every sound, the crack of a rifle, the whistle of a round past her head, the grunt of a soldier landing a suppressive shot, was input into her mental map of the battlefield. The enemy pressed relentlessly, trying to pin them down again, but Claire's focus never faltered. Her eyes caught the slightest movement. Her hands adjusted grip and balance in a fluid motion that blended brute strength with precision. The climb over the first ridge tested her endurance, each step threatening to unbalance both herself and Reynolds. Yet she moved with unwavering determination, driven by the singular purpose of getting him to extraction. Each swing of her rifle cleared paths. Each call to her squad synchronized suppressive fire with movement, orchestrating a small unit maneuver under extreme pressure. Finally, after what felt like hours condensed into minutes, Claire reached a vantage point where the extraction helicopter could land safely. She lowered Reynolds carefully, checking his vitals one last time before signaling for evacuation. The roar of the approaching aircraft brought a surge of relief, but she maintained position until every squad member and the wounded commander were secure. Even in the face of exhaustion and pain, her vigilance remained absolute. Enemy fire continued to probe, but it was no longer enough to stop the coordinated extraction. In that crucible of fire and danger, Claire's courage, training, and quick thinking had turned a near-certain tragedy into a controlled rescue. Every calculated movement, every second of exposure, had been a deliberate choice to save a life. Reynolds' survival rested entirely on her decisions, and she had proven that leadership under fire could overcome even the most perilous circumstances. Claire Monroe's focus never wavered as the extraction point came into view. The helicopter's rotor wash kicked up clouds of dust and debris, reducing visibility and making every movement a challenge. Enemy fighters still clung to high ground, their positions scattered. Across ridges that offered clear lines of fire on the valley below, Claire immediately ordered her squad into defensive positions, covering all approaches to the landing zone. Suppressive fire became their rhythm, each volley calibrated to keep insurgents pinned, while minimizing exposure to their own team. Every soldier moved with precision, understanding that the slightest hesitation could unravel the entire operation. She knelt behind a boulder, keeping Reynolds stable against her chest while scanning the terrain for threats. Specialist Daniel Ortiz provided covering fire to the north, and Corporal Ethan Brooks took a vantage point on a low ridge to monitor enemy movement from the east. Claire's mind functioned like a command center, tracking positions, estimating trajectories, and predicting enemy reactions. Her squad responded instantly to hand signals, maintaining the flow of the assault corridor. It was a delicate balance, offensive. Pressure to suppress the enemy while ensuring the wounded commander remained safe and the squad avoided unnecessary exposure. The helicopter's skids touched the ground with a metallic thud, signaling the final phase of the extraction. Claire assessed the angle of approach and the surrounding terrain. Two insurgents attempted to flank the team from a concealed gully's edge. Without hesitation, she signaled Ortiz, who neutralized the threat with precision. Each engagement was brief, violent, and deliberate. Reynolds' breathing grew steadier as medics prepared stretchers and loaded essential equipment for evacuation. Every step had to be calculated, every movement executed flawlessly. There was no room for error. The helicopter's arrival created a window, and that window would close if the squad faltered. Claire's orders were concise but exacting. Squad, maintain suppressive fire on the ridges. Prepare to move wounded. Cover all angles. Move on my command. Her team responded like an extension of her own instincts. The synergy between leader and squad became almost instinctual, a dance shaped by years of training and repeated drills. Under far less forgiving conditions, bullets continued to kick up sand and ricochet off rock, but Claire's attention never shifted from the objective. Keep everyone alive until the helicopter could lift off. Finally, the medics secured Reynolds onto the stretcher, and Claire ensured every team member had cover. She guided the squad backward in coordinated bounds, drawing fire away from the wounded SEAL commander. The helicopter lifted, rotors shredding the desert air, carrying Reynolds toward surgical care. Claire and her squad maintained defensive positions until the aircraft cleared the ridge. Only then did she allow herself a brief exhale, though her eyes continued scanning for any residual threats. The mission had demanded split-second decisions under extreme pressure, precise tactical coordination, and unwavering leadership. Claire's ability to orchestrate the extraction ensured no additional casualties. Every member of the team knew that success in combat relied on trust, training, and decisive action. And on that day, Claire Monroe had demonstrated all three in abundance. The SEAL commander's survival wasn't a stroke of luck. It was the culmination of calculated risks, expert leadership, and the disciplined execution of every tactical principle she had internalized as a ranger. The helicopter lifted off, carrying Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds to medical care, and the valley fell eerily silent except for the distant echo of spent gunfire. Claire Monroe lowered her rifle, allowing her body a brief moment to process the intensity of what had just transpired. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins, making her heart race and her hands tremble slightly. Around her, the squad regrouped, checking weapons, assessing minor scrapes and bruises, and confirming that no one had been left behind. Relief mixed with fatigue, each soldier acutely aware of the razor-thin margin that had separated life from death. Claire's gaze drifted to the ridges that had held enemy fire mere minutes ago. The terrain, so familiar and yet so lethal, seemed to exhale along with her. Every rock, every slope had demanded careful consideration, tactical judgment, and unwavering courage. She replayed the sequence of events in her mind, the split-second decisions, the suppressive fire, the calculated bounds through exposed ground. Every choice had been a conscious gamble, each one necessary to save Reynolds and his team. the weight of command pressed on her shoulders. A reminder that leadership in combat was measured not in medals or praise, but in lives protected. Her squad fell silent for a moment, sharing glances that conveyed respect and understanding without words. They had trusted her judgment, followed her lead, and together they had navigated chaos with precision. The bond formed under fire was unspoken yet unbreakable. The trust between soldiers in combat was absolute, a currency earned only through shared danger and mutual reliance. Claire felt the gravity of that trust as she counted her squad, confirming that each member was accounted for and ready to return to base. Medical teams would stabilize Reynolds, and intelligence officers would later review the operation, analyzing each tactical decision for lessons and commendations. Claire, however, found her focus drawn elsewhere. She thought of the commander she had saved, conscious yet wounded, relying entirely on her initiative. The realization that her actions had directly preserved a life settled heavily in her chest. Combat was not just about engagement or firepower. It was about responsibility, courage, and the ability to act decisively when everything else seemed uncertain. The sun had begun its descent, painting the valley in deep orange and gold, casting long shadows over the scarred landscape. Claire allowed herself a rare moment of reflection, feeling the exhaustion creep in along with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had acted without hesitation, risked everything to save another human being, and emerged with her squad intact. It was a victory measured not in territory gained or enemy casualties inflicted, but in the preservation of life. Even amidst the adrenaline, fear, and chaos, there was a subtle understanding growing within her that sometimes the most profound moments in a soldier's life were not those chronicled in reports, but the ones etched into memory through courage, loyalty, and humanity under fire. The battlefield had tested her limits, sharpened her instincts, and reinforced the core truth of her profession. Leadership was defined in the crucible of danger, and the measure of a soldier was not only in combat skill, but in the unwavering commitment to protect those who could not protect themselves. The chaos of the battlefield had finally given way to a heavy quiet. Claire Monroe stood slightly apart from her squad, allowing the medics to secure Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds for transport. Even in her exhaustion, her eyes remained fixed on him, watching as he clutched the edge of the stretcher, pain and gratitude etched into his features. It was a fleeting moment, but one that carried weight far beyond the immediacy of survival. Claire's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and unspoken emotion, a recognition that something fundamental had shifted between them, forged not in words but in shared experience under fire. David's gaze found hers, a subtle acknowledgement that transcended rank and protocol. It was a look that spoke of trust, of reliance, and of the unspoken understanding that only those who had faced life and death, decisions together, could share. No words were necessary. The intensity of the moment carried them both. Every soldier present might have seen a successful extraction, but only the two of them fully comprehended the stakes, the split-second choices, and the raw courage that had made it possible. The silent connection was immediate, palpable, and impossible to ignore. Claire felt a strange combination of exhilaration and exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried her through the assault began to fade, leaving a warm, reflective calm in its place. She realized that in saving Reynolds, she had done more than fulfill her duty. She had touched a life in a way that left an indelible mark on both of them. The bond was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a slight nod of recognition, a shared understanding that transcended ordinary conversation. It was the quiet aftermath of heroism, where unspoken emotions emerge in the space left behind by extreme circumstances. Reynolds, for his part, had always valued discipline, strategy, and precise execution. Yet in this moment, those professional tendencies were softened by a human truth. He had been vulnerable, dependent, and entirely at the mercy of someone who had acted decisively to save him. The realization sparked a profound respect that went beyond military protocol. Claire had demonstrated not just tactical excellence, but empathy, courage, and an unflinching commitment to the lives of others. These qualities, witnessed in the crucible of combat, created the first thread of a connection neither could ignore. Even as medics prepared to lift Reynolds into the helicopter, both remained acutely aware of each other. There was no need for dramatic gestures or declarations. The silent connection was established through action, through shared danger, and through mutual recognition of courage and integrity. It was the kind of bond that would quietly influence their interactions in the months and years to come, forming a foundation built on respect, trust, and understanding. In that fleeting moment, Claire and Reynolds glimpsed a future neither could yet define. The mission had ended, but its impact would linger, shaping their choices, interactions, and emotions long after the last bullet had been fired. The battlefield had given them more than survival. It had given them a connection forged under fire, one that would quietly grow into something neither had anticipated but both would cherish. The weeks following the extraction were filled with recovery, reflection, and the quiet work of rebuilding lives disrupted by conflict. Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds remained in medical care, his body healing from injuries that had nearly ended his life, while Claire Monroe returned to her ranger duties, carrying the memory of the mission, like a weight that was equal parts pride and responsibility. Despite the physical distance, both felt an invisible tether connecting them, an unspoken bond that lingered beyond the battlefield. Communication began in small, cautious ways. A brief message of thanks, a carefully worded inquiry about recovery, simple gestures that carried extraordinary meaning. For Reynolds, these notes were reminders that courage existed in someone else's hands, someone who had risked everything without hesitation. For Claire, each reply was confirmation that her decisions had mattered, that the lives she had fought to protect had endured. What began as professional acknowledgement gradually hinted at something deeper, a mutual admiration that neither could articulate fully but both understood instinctively. The shared experiences of combat left an imprint that civilian relationships rarely mirrored. Every soldier, every mission, shaped perspectives in ways only those who had been under fire could comprehend. Claire and Reynolds discovered in each other a rare alignment of values, discipline, resilience, and unwavering commitment to duty. Conversations moved beyond formalities, touching on philosophies of leadership, the importance of teamwork, and the quiet struggles of life in service. Their interactions, initially brief and measured, grew in depth and warmth as they found comfort in mutual understanding. Even amidst the challenges of recovery and duty, subtle moments spoke volumes. A brief phone call to discuss a logistical issue became an opportunity to exchange personal insights. A shared glance across a training room carried reassurance. Trust, respect, and admiration deepened incrementally, layered atop the intense emotional experience of the battlefield. They both recognized that this connection was extraordinary, not simply because of its rarity, but because it had been forged under conditions where hesitation could have meant tragedy. By the time Reynolds returned to active duty, the foundation of their relationship was firmly in place. It was a quiet evolution, devoid of fanfare but rich in significance. The bond between them was no longer defined solely by survival or heroism, but by an emerging intimacy rooted in respect, shared experience, and the recognition that some connections withstand time, distance, and circumstance. The battlefield had introduced them. Recovery and reflection had nurtured the first seeds of something far greater. As time passed, the connection between Claire Monroe and Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds matured from quiet admiration into profound respect. Their interactions, once limited to mission-critical communication, began to include professional collaboration and strategic discussions, often spanning hours of planning and debriefing. Each encounter reinforced the foundation laid on the battlefield, trust forged under fire, and an understanding of each other's capabilities that few outside the military could ever grasp. Claire's tactical expertise and instinctive leadership were matched by Reynolds' strategic acumen and calm decisiveness. Together, they approached joint operations with a seamless efficiency, anticipating each other's decisions and complementing one another's strengths. Their teamwork became a model within their respective units, demonstrating how collaboration between Rangers and SEALs could yield extraordinary results. Beyond professional excellence, each saw in the other a dedication and courage that went beyond duty, a quiet strength that inspired loyalty, and respect. The professional trust gradually gave way to subtle personal recognition. Reynolds admired Claire's ability to remain composed under extreme pressure, her unwavering focus, and her compassion for those she protected. Claire, in turn, recognized Reynolds' humility despite his accomplishments, his resilience during recovery, and the steadiness of his character even in high-stakes scenarios. These qualities, observed over months of joint exercises and operational planning, deepened the emotional connection that had first sparked on the battlefield. Small, meaningful interactions began to punctuate their routine. A shared coffee during long debriefings, a brief conversation about a family anecdote, or a note of encouragement after a challenging training exercise. Each instance carried more weight than either openly acknowledged. The respect that underpinned their professional relationship became the conduit for emotional intimacy. a subtle yet undeniable thread weaving them closer. What made this bond extraordinary was its authenticity. It was never forced, never dramatized, and never rushed. Instead, it grew, organically, guided by mutual understanding, shared experience, and a recognition that both had been shaped by circumstances few could comprehend. They were two people whose lives had intersected at a moment of extreme vulnerability and courage, and in that intersection had emerged a quiet, resilient connection. By the end of this period, Claire and Reynolds had built a relationship that was as much about shared values as it was about personal affection. Their mutual respect was unshakable, and with it came the promise of something deeper, an emotional partnership ready to extend beyond missions, beyond deployments, and ultimately into a life shared together. Years passed, and the lives of Claire Monroe and Lieutenant Commander David Reynolds evolved from battlefield camaraderie to enduring partnership. The years of shared missions, trust, and mutual respect had quietly transformed into a bond that neither combat nor distance could diminish. Their relationship, nurtured through patience, understanding, and countless small gestures, had grown into something both profound and resilient, a connection forged under the highest pressure and strengthened by time. When they finally stood side by side, committing themselves to one another in marriage, it was more than a celebration of love. It was the culmination of years of courage, resilience, and unwavering support. Friends and comrades who had witnessed their bravery, shared the risks, and experienced the intensity of military life were present, honoring not just the couple, but the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. Every glance, every touch, reflected a story of survival, loyalty, and the quiet power of human connection that thrives even in the most extreme circumstances. Claire and David's union symbolized more than personal happiness. It represented the profound truth that courage extends beyond the battlefield. The same strength that saves lives can also nurture love, foster trust, and create partnerships built on mutual respect and shared experience. Their journey reminded everyone that heroism is not limited to acts of combat. It is also found in the commitment to support, protect, and uplift those who matter most. As viewers, there is a lesson embedded in their story. Life's most significant missions are often about people, relationships, and the courage to act with integrity, compassion, and conviction. In a world filled with challenges, the way we choose to protect, support, and honor one another defines our true strength. If this story inspired you, take a moment to reflect on the people in your own life who have shown courage, loyalty, and selflessness. Reach out, express gratitude, or simply honor those connections that make you stronger. And for more incredible, real-life stories of bravery, resilience, and extraordinary human bonds, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with those who would appreciate the power of courage and love intertwined. Claire Monroe and David Reynolds' journey proves that some connections forged under the toughest conditions last a lifetime, and sometimes the most heroic act is the love and loyalty we show to each other every day. Their story ends not with gunfire, but with commitment, hope, and a reminder that courage and compassion are inseparable.